Hey, Jefi, reaching out from Chapel Hill. I'm back from my epic trip.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Very exciting. Can't wait to talk about this one.
I know.
How long were you gone? 14 days?
2 full weeks. That is correct.
That's amazing. Yeah. This is an exciting podcast for me because usually Ed and I talk a little bit more about, kind of what we have coming on in the show, but I really wanted to hear this for the first time from him for a lot of these things. So I'm excited to do this.
She's up
All
for
right,
the surprises. So yeah, today we are calling this episode. Let's talk about episode. Let's
what's
talk
an episode?
Episode. It's like an epidural.
Ew. No, nobody needs that.
So
Ever.
This episode is called Let's Talk About Flow.
Let's talk about flow, baby. Let's talk about you.
All right. Keep your day job.
All the good things and the bad things. All right. Anybody that knows who that song's by needs to put that in the show notes.
There we go. That'll be a challenge. Mm-hmm. So a little backstory here. As we just kind of preluded, I came off a 2-week high adventure gravel bike trip where myself and 3 buddies, we went from Banff, Canada to Missoula, Montana on backcountry gravel roads, 525 miles of just being out there.
How often did you kick in your motor?
No, we were asked that, like, hey, do you have e-bikes? And we're like, get away from us.
I know this is completely you guys. None of you had e-bikes. You all were No.
Come on.
you were all manpower. That's awesome.
Yeah, and
Very
self-supported,
impressive.
carrying all our own stuff, having our bear spray, camping equipment, food, the whole thing. Out there just living in the wilderness, and it was amazing. And this is not to be a travel blog or pod. This is really just talking about some things that we can all apply going forward, which is when you get out with friends and you're really challenging yourself, it just produced massive flow. And it was the perfect way to recharge our bodies and our minds. And so we want to make this kind of available to folks on how to do it.
This transfers into life, travel, business. I mean, flow state is huge. And you're going to explain flow a little bit, right? Because we all have our own interpretation of that.
Absolutely. I'm going to do
great.
that. Yeah.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Yeah, we're going to do that.
Keeping you in the box, buddy.
Yeah, you run it. You keep me in the box. So, so why it matters? I get let out of the box every Monday when we drop this. I come out of the box, I go back in the box. So why it matters? Research is really showing that flow state will keep your body and your brain young.
Oh.
It literally builds new neural connections. And if you want to stay healthy and vital, you seek out flow. And there's lots of different ways to do that. And you get bonus points if you have some other conditions that go along with it that really just vitalize you. So that's what we want to talk about. So you asked, what is flow? Do you want me to define that?
Well, I just want to go back and say that's probably why you look at least 15 years younger than your age, is that you're in a constant state of vacation flow.
I try to be. In fact, I ran into a client and they're like, I told her what I got back from. She's like, when are you going to grow up?
Never.
And that's what I said. I said, never.
Yeah.
So it was
good.
great. So what is flow? So Milhai Csikszentmihalyi, I tried to say that 3 times fast.
Wow. I looked at that name written there and I thought, how's he going to pronounce that?
So Milhai Csikszentmihalyi is the father of flow. And he was a psychologist. He was out of the University of Chicago, Hungarian immigrant. And he realized he was studying artists, the creatives, so painters as well as musicians, and just seeing them go into this deep concentration mode and what was happening to them. And then he noticed the same phenomenon amongst rock climbers, mountaineers, and saying, hey, there's something bigger going on here. And so he really dug into that. And what he called flow is a state in which people are so involved in an activity that nothing else seems to matter.
I love that.
Isn't that great? So being
Oh
in a
my gosh.
state at which you're so involved in the activity that nothing else seems to matter. And so we call that being in the zone or being in the groove, but it's really a flow state. And it is, in positive psychology, that's a whole thing.
Right. Just one little interjection here. As always, I'm always interrupting you.
Yeah, please do. It's combo.
But something for me, and I get into flow state a lot, is that I'm also perpetual. So that flow state, like sometimes Cody will go, have you eaten lunch? Like it's dinner time. What is going on? And I love being in that space because I feel like my brain is just alive and it's sharp and it's in there. That's kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah, it's when you're in an activity. So it could be if you're musically inclined, maybe you're playing the piano, or I even know for me, like in real estate, if I'm what I call deal mode, where I'm focused on a transaction and getting something done, and then you look up and go, where did the last hour and a half go? I forgot to eat.
Yeah.
That's literally flow. And Milhai, he defined it. There was an article that he was interviewed in Wired magazine, and he said it's being completely involved in an activity for its own sake. The ego falls away, time flies. Every action, movement, and thought follows inevitably from the previous one, like playing jazz. Your whole being is involved, and you're using your skills to the utmost. So I think that's a really good kind of way to define it, right? You're just like in there, you're grooving on it.
Right.
So that's the state that you try and get into. And it can be kind of challenging. It's like, okay, I now understand what that is, but how do I get the right match and what can contribute? How do I do that? And what activities support that and skill level? So do you want to talk a little bit about that now, or any other questions before we jump in?
No. Why don't you run with that piece, and then I'm just going to interject in there.
Okay, cool. So one of the ways to think about it is when flow occurs when you have a balance between the difficulty of the activity and your skill set.
Oh.
Yeah.
So the harder you have to work on something, the more intense your brain gets to solving what you're working on?
Yeah, it's that match, right? So what you're really trying to do is get this balance occurring. So one way to think about it is you've got activities that are, think of your skills of being on a scale of like there's high skill, low skill. And there's difficulty, high difficulty, low difficulty. So think of like a 4 block on that.
Okay.
If you can visualize that.
I totally can.
So if you're in an activity that's difficult, so it's highly difficult, but your skill matches, you have high skill in that area, then you will achieve flow because you've got the ability to achieve this challenging task. So here's a great example, and this occurred on the bike trip when we were out there. Okay. We had some sections where we were in some pretty gnarly single track.
Right.
Okay, so mountain biking skills came in.
Does everybody know what single track is?
So yeah, I'm sorry. So yes, so single track mountain biking, one groove going down a mountain, maybe 3 feet wide, 2 feet wide.
That puts it way, way, way in perspective.
Right. So you're on a narrow road, pathway really. And we had like a 6-mile descent. So going down along a ridge, a mountain ridge, it's wide enough to navigate that, but you plunge to your death if you overshoot it. Right. Okay. So.
Okay.
So
I'm glad you came home.
Yeah, exactly. Me too.
This podcast would be really boring without you.
So two of us were very comfortable in that environment. We'd done enough mountain biking. I'm not an expert mountain biker, but I've done enough of it. I've been in those situations. I've cycled in Moab in similar conditions. I was comfortable. So I knew I had the skill set in this challenging environment. I had to be incredibly focused. So we came out of that section, and the two of us that did it, that had that match, high skill, high challenge, we were like on drugs. We were just popping. And in fact, we'll include a video after this of when we finished, when the guy who went through it asked me, what did I think of that? And you'll hear it in my voice and see that, I'm like out there because all the dopamine is just shooting through my body.
Right.
Endorphins, I'm like in a really, really good place.
Where I would be silent screaming the entire way through. Like literally my brain would be like, "Wah!"
It would freeze.
Yeah.
So the other two, one very talented, skilled, better mountain biker than I am, but he's afraid he has a heights issue. Oh. So he had to walk through there.
Okay.
And then the other cyclist, he's only been on a mountain bike like once, right? So he brought all his road skills. He had
badass.
Right. So he had to push through.
Yeah.
And you could see the anxiety playing because when you have high challenge, low skill, when it mismatches, then you produce anxiety.
So you don't go into flow.
You don't go into flow. You could become anxious. So for me, I'm not a downhill skier. So if I get into a skiing environment, I'm not as confident, and so then that gets more anxious for me. Where, so you have to build those levels up. You don't start on the black diamonds. You start on like the bunny hop, right? And what we were doing, bunny hill, yeah, exactly. That's really how much I ski, right? So
bunny hop.
Bunny hop. That's biking. I do bunny hop. So
that's good too.
Yeah. So again, to get a flow state, you want to have this high quadrant of you have the skill and it's challenging. So for your sport, for example, for road cycling, descending, you'll reach flow state in descending, where you're going down wild, steep stuff at a high speed. But probably the first time you did that, you're riding the brakes the whole time and freaking out.
Absolutely.
You had the mismatch.
Right.
But as that skill comes up, it produces flow.
Yeah.
So that's what you're looking for. Now, here's the trick.
Exciting. Like, I'm excited about this. I want to get in there.
It's the most amazing. It's the most amazing thing. Now, here's the catch.
Okay.
As your skill goes up, you have to increase the difficulty to reach flow state. And that's how people become these adrenaline junkies, right?
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Right. And so it's a slippery slope to where all of a sudden, if you're a rock climber, now you're freelining and you're not using things. And then eventually they all die because they make a mistake. Right. So, but they're trying to keep pushing
we hope
that
not,
envelope.
Though.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly. Okay. So that's it. When you get this match between high difficulty and high skill.
All right, this is my favorite part. This is the bonus points.
Oh yes, the bonus points. So
do not skip over the bonus points because my first thing is the very favorite.
So you get bonus points in flow if you add nature to it.
Ooh, favorite.
And then dynamic motion. So when you're doing complicated things.
Okay.
And you have your friends involved.
Yes. I don't know why when you just did that, I just imagined myself dancing because my dance moves are kind of not really normal dance moves. And so that's like a lot of dynamic.
Yeah, like Elaine and Friends. Do you dance like Elaine and Friends?
I do. I love Elaine. I actually play that back and forth and try to, make sure I do the same as her. Okay. But seriously though, the nature part, because, we hear a lot about, tree bathing or nature bathing or, being out in nature. So as people do sport or do hiking, I can even think that, and maybe this isn't on your list, but even backpacking, because it's difficult and you're navigating and you're moving and you're, doing all these things, that to me would seem like it's a high intensity nature type of thing. Does that kind of qualify?
It does, absolutely, because you're moving your body and it's challenging and it's novel and you're observing, and especially if you go on a group backpacking, you're going to get that. You're having to you're having to problem solve.
Right.
It's interesting. So Stephen Kotler has a new book out called Gnar Country,
Okay.
like gnarly and country, and he talks a lot about this. And we'll put a link to his book on that. But nature, when you're out like the green bathing, like you're talking about, that literally reduces inflammation in people. Their brains just come alive.
Yes.
And we were seeing that on our trip. We were just like, oh gosh, we feel so good. The dynamic motion, that's really good for your bone density, right? And your balance. So that's why you're kind of getting some bonus points there. Because, if you want to live a long time, don't fall, right? You have good balance, have strong legs. And then the social component. Yeah. When you have your friends involved in that, and there's certain activities that have built-in social structure around it. Like we'll talk about really flowy stuff, and they tend to get higher scores on that because there's a friendship culture built into it.
Yes.
So really, really, really good. The other piece of this too that really helps on flow is you need feedback. It needs to be goal-based.
Okay.
And you get a feedback loop. So you're doing something difficult and you're trying to achieve something, and you know whether you're succeeding or not. So think about skiing. You're like, oh, I'm going to do that black diamond run. I've never done that before. I'm going to go hit this. Oh, I'm not able to do it. Now you're able to do it, right? So you're getting that metric. So activities that give you that help.
That's amazing. Do you want to talk? You want to just spitball some of those flowy things?
Yeah. So ideas. Here's things to get into, or if there's some of your sports already, and you're somebody maybe saying, "Why are you doing that? Why are you spending that money?" It's like, hey, now you got a reason to like justify that.
I'm Benjamin Buttoning back my age.
Yeah, you'll just be more productive at work. So and it makes life worth living. Literally, the more flow stuff you do. So what's super flowy? Skiing. Okay. Skiing really, really high on flowing.
All right.
It's dynamic in nature. It's challenging. There's a built-in social structure around it. You get your family together. There's après ski. So there's all that stuff going on. And I'm actually like, I need to get into skiing. I think that's going to be my... Lynn might have heard this one. I don't know. So I think...
talk to Cody about that. Because of the two of us, I'm the skier and he's the cycler. And so now I do cycling and he does skiing. And when he skis, I ski backwards so I can keep my eyes on him.
Yeah. Anyway.
Okay. What's the next thing on the list?
Mountain biking, super flowy. Again, takes a lot of concentration challenge, especially if you're doing it with your buddies. Surfing. Surfing's like 10 out of 10.
It's amazing.
It's really, really high. Tennis.
Yeah.
Super, super flowy. Rock climbing. We talked a little bit about that. Pickleball, believe it or not, like I don't think it's for me, but I know it's for a lot of people, but
don't knock it till you try it, buddy.
I know. And I have to be careful because I'll be the one, once I try it, I'll be like getting everybody to do it. I got a little bit of that in me, but because there's the social component and it's dynamic and it's challenging and it's like, that's up for things that are less athletic, that are flowy, painting, music. I didn't talk about road cycling. Road cycling.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm all less athletic, dude. Every time I come home from a bike ride, I need a nap. So
I should have had that higher
needs to get out of there.
Yeah, just higher in the list.
Take that back.
The thing on road cycling and why it tends to score a little lower is it's very meditative, and I know we're going to do an episode on that. When you're just in the pocket and you're doing your thing, you tend to zone out a little bit more. But descending, big time flowy, right?
Yeah.
So again, that's why mountain biking is a little bit different, because you literally have to focus on every rock you're trying to miss. Dancing, flowy.
I love dancing. Yeah.
And as I mentioned, real estate negotiations, and I think sales or listing presentations, that type of thing, flowy, because you're having to engage and focus and be right there in it.
Get in the rhythm.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So one of the things I want to talk about to kind of wrap up, and then you can ask some other questions, is that what I was finding when we were out there is we were focused so intensely on what we were doing, we would ride from basically 8 to 5.
Okay.
So riding, but then you're taking breaks, you're having a backpacker's lunch by a river, you're doing all this stuff, you're just greenwashed, the whole thing. I would finish up and I would have a little bit of vertigo when I was laying in my tent. I'm like, whoa, I'm having to take my focus and relax it. So you could literally feel your brain just like having to step back a little bit. So that you're building all these different things going on.
I love that.
Super,
That actually,
super cool.
I know we're doing an episode on meditation, but that is how I feel after meditating. I actually feel like I got to freaking ground myself because of that, the whole vertigo thing, which is interesting because those two, the flow state and the meditation, really do go together.
They sure do. And I'm looking forward to that episode because they are kind of the yin and the yang of what's going on with flow. And we'll kind of introduce that concept in that segment. Yeah. Any other questions on flow before we go?
Well, I love the fact that it improves creativity, right? So, in our jobs, we're constantly being pushed to be creative and to think outside the box and to really help our clients. And that's something that when you're in these flow states, you usually come back when you get home or wherever you're camping, you get into your campsite and your brain is so creative at that point. It had room to kind of pull itself in, and then you can let yourself out. So I would say journaling after that. Is that something you did on your trip?
Yep, did a little bit of that as well. So you come in, and as you come down, just do that. Also posing questions amongst your group. I did a lot of that. Like, hey, let's talk about this and noodle on that stuff. But you're right. It improves creativity. It reduces stress. Provides greater motivation and happiness. So it's really something worth seeking out. There's a lot of different ways to do it. Yep. And I hope this motivates folks. They can probably hear me jumping out of the screen on this one.
Yes.
As to how cool it was. And we are going to have the creative team here throw in the video from when I came through that gnarly single track. Right. And how we reacted. And there's a few things going on there. You can hear how we're just giddy, and then you can hear the birds in the background. We're amongst nature.
I can't wait to see that one.
And we're just like, oh my gosh, this is the coolest thing. We lived through this. So.
Hey, I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you sharing this from your perspective, because a lot of times, we read books and we have experiences, but this is something that you just had happen to you, and I really can feel your excitement about it. It's really neat. So I'm stoked to look at the links. We can link the books that you did. I'm not even going to attempt that gentleman's name, so we can put him in there as well. Yep. But hey, coming to you from San Diego and Chapel Hill, Ed and I wish you the best and look forward to seeing you soon.
All right. See y'all later.